The old car, a reliable but rust-speckled companion, Stella had affectionately named the Wanderer, finally shuddered to a halt in front of number 7, Willow Creek Lane. Dust motes danced in the late afternoon sunbeams that filtered through the ancient oak canopy overhead, illuminating the slightly crooked sign that declared the street name in faded, elegant script. This was it. St. Jude's Creek. Her new beginning. Stella stretched, her joints protesting after the long drive from the city. Her long, dark hair, usually a wild tangle of curls, was currently confined in a messy bun, escaping in wisps around her heart-shaped face. Her large, expressive hazel eyes, usually alight with curiosity, currently held a mixture of exhaustion and a fragile, hopeful determination. She wasn't running away, not exactly. More like drifting towards a quieter life, towards the elusive inspiration that had dried up on her like a desert spring in the frantic pace of urban living. The cottage before her was exactly as it had appeared in the online photos, charmingly dilapidated. A coat of peeling robin's egg blue paint clung to its wooden clapboards, and a riot of overgrown roses, their blooms a faded blush, threatened to consume the front porch. The windows, some sparkling clean, others clouded with years of neglect, promised sun-drenched rooms within. It was small, sturdy, and utterly enchanting. It was also, she suspected, going to be a lot of work. A deep breath, scented with damp earth and the distant perfume of honeysuckle, filled her lungs. This was good. This was real. No more sterile apartment buildings, no more of the ceaseless hum of traffic. Here, the loudest sound was the chirping of a hidden bird and the gentle murmur of a nearby creek, which she knew from the real estate listing ran just beyond the back garden. She unlocked the front door with a key that felt heavy and old in her palm, turning the brass until it clicked with a satisfying thud. The interior was cool and quiet, smelling faintly of dust, old wood, and something indefinably sweet, like forgotten spices. Sunlight streamed through a large bay window in what would be her living room, illuminating the bare floorboards and a lone, elegant spider web shimmering in a corner. The walls were painted a neutral cream, a blank canvas for her imagination, and for the life she hoped to build here. Stella wandered through the rooms, her worn boots echoing softly. The kitchen was surprisingly spacious, with an ancient but sturdy-looking stove and a deep porcelain sink. The 2 bedrooms upstairs were small but cozy, and the bathroom, though tiny, boasted a clawfoot tub that instantly won her over. This wasn't just a house, it was a story waiting to unfold. And she, Stella Thorne, illustrator of children's books and currently a woman in search of herself, was ready to turn its pages. Her first task, after unpacking the essentials, a kettle, her favorite mug, a well-loved copy of Anne of Green Gables, and a sketchpad, was to make tea. The ritual was a soothing anchor in her often chaotic life. As the water boiled, she stepped out onto the back porch, a rickety affair that creaked a friendly welcome. The garden was a wild tangle. A few struggling tomato plants vied for space with towering weeds, and a small apple tree, laden with unripe fruit, leaned precariously. Beyond, she could hear the distinct babble of the creek. It was beautiful, untamed, and needed a lot of love. Just like her, she thought with a wry smile. As she sipped her tea, the warmth seeping into her hands, she began to notice the details. The kitchen door, a charmingly old-fashioned half-door, didn't quite close properly. One of the window frames in the living room had a visible gap, letting in a subtle draft. And the front gate, she'd noticed upon arrival, hung sadly on one hinge. It was clear, even to her artist's eye, that the cottage needed some serious structural attention. Not just cosmetic touches, but the kind of work that required skilled hands and a deep understanding of wood and craftsmanship. She'd seen the flyers tacked to the bulletin board at the general store when she'd stopped for directions. Sterling & Sons, custom woodwork repairs and renovations, a local business, proudly advertised. Perhaps she should call them. The thought of inviting a stranger into her new sanctuary, especially a handyman, usually filled Stella with a faint dread. She preferred to tackle things herself, even if her attempts often resulted in charmingly amateurish repairs. But this cottage, she knew, deserved better. It deserved someone who knew what they were doing. The next morning, after a surprisingly peaceful night's sleep, in a sleeping bag on the living room floor, Stella began to unpack in earnest. Books, art supplies, quirky thrift store finds. her life slowly began to emerge from the cardboard boxes. She made a list of necessary repairs, the mental tally growing longer with each passing hour. The wonky kitchen door, the drafty window, the broken gate, a loose floorboard on the stairs, and a curious damp patch on the ceiling in the spare bedroom that made her particularly nervous. Finally, with a sigh, she pulled out her phone and searched for Sterling and Sons. A local number popped up. She hesitated, then pressed dial. A deep, calm voice answered on the third ring. Sterling. Dea. Hello, Stella began, a little flustered. My name is Stella Thorne. I just moved into number 7 Willow Creek Lane. I was hoping to get an estimate for some repairs on my cottage. 7. Willow Creek, the voice repeated, a thoughtful cadence to it. The old Miller place, knew it well. What kind of repairs are we talking about? Stella rattled off her list, feeling a bit silly describing the wonky door and the curious damp patch. The voice on the other end listened patiently, interjecting only once for clarification about the window frame. All right, he said when she finished. I can swing by this afternoon, say around 3, see what we're dealing with. Oh, that would be wonderful, Stella exclaimed, relieved. Thank you so much. No problem, Miss Thorne. See you then. The line clicked softly. Stella spent the rest of the morning tidying up, trying to make the house presentable for its first official visitor. She even managed to coax the kettle to produce a fresh pot of herbal tea, just in case. Promptly at 3 o'clock, a beat-up but well-maintained pickup truck, the bed filled with an assortment of lumber and tools, pulled into her driveway. A man unfolded himself from the driver's seat. He was tall, broader than she'd expected, with shoulders that spoke of years of physical work. His hair, the color of rich earth, was streaked with silver at the temples, and his face, though rugged, had a kindness etched around his eyes. They were a startling shade of blue, like a mountain lake on a clear day, and they regarded her with an open, unhurried assessment. He wore faded jeans, a plaid shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, and a leather apron slung over one shoulder. He looked utterly, reassuringly capable. Miss Thorne, he asked, his voice even deeper in person, a low rumble that felt oddly comforting. Yes, that's me, Stella. And you must be Sterling. She extended a hand and he took it. His grip was firm, warm, and his palm was calloused but gentle. A spark, small and unexpected, flickered between them. Just Sterling, he confirmed, a faint smile touching his lips. It was a subtle transformation, softening the lines around his eyes and adding a crinkle to their corners. My father retired a few years back. Still helps out with the book sometimes, but the Sons part is just me now. Oh, Stella said, feeling a blush creep up her neck. Well, it's lovely to meet you, Sterling. Please, come in. She led him through the cottage, pointing out each issue. Sterling moved with a quiet efficiency, his eyes missing nothing. He ran a hand over the wonky kitchen door, tested the window frame, peered at the damp patch on the ceiling with a focused frown. He didn't speak much, but his presence was solid, reassuring. As he examined the loose floorboard on the stairs, Stella found herself studying him. He wasn't conventionally handsome in the way magazine models were, but there was an honesty in his gaze, a quiet strength in his bearing that she found incredibly attractive. He smelled faintly of sawdust and something clean, like fresh air after a rain. The frame here, he said, gesturing to the drafty window. It's warped. We'd have to replace the whole sash, or at least plane it down and refit. The kitchen door just needs new hinges and possibly a slight trim. The gate, he paused, a slight smile playing on his lips, definitely needs new hinges, and probably a reinforced post. He moved to the spare bedroom, shining a small flashlight on the damp patch. This looks like a slow leak from the roof. Nothing major, but it'll need a patch and possibly some flashing replaced. I can check the attic, see if I can pinpoint it. Stella nodded, trying to absorb all the technical terms. So, it's fixable? She asked, a thread of anxiety in her voice. She'd sunk most of her savings into this cottage. Sterling turned to her, his blue eyes meeting hers. Everything's fixable, Stella. It just takes time and the right tools. His voice was calm, steady, and the simple assurance settled something fluttering in her chest. Looks like a good, solid old house. Just needs a little TLC. He spent another 20 minutes taking measurements, jotting notes in a small leather-bound notebook. Stella watched him, fascinated by the quiet precision of his movements. He seemed to have an innate understanding of the house, communicating with it in a way she couldn't quite grasp. Finally, he closed his notebook. "All right, I'll draw up an estimate for you. I've got a couple of bigger jobs this week, but I could probably start on some of the smaller things next week, maybe the door and the gate. The roof might take a bit longer, depending on the weather and getting the materials." "That sounds perfect," Stella said, feeling a wave of relief. "Thank you, Sterling. I really appreciate you coming out so quickly." "It's no trouble," he replied, already heading towards the front door. He paused on the threshold, turning back to her. "Welcome to St. Jude's Creek, Stella. His smile this time was warmer, more genuine, and it sent a surprising shiver down her spine. "Hope you settle in well." With a nod, he was gone, the rumble of his truck fading into the quiet afternoon. Stella stood in the doorway for a moment, the faint scent of sawdust lingering in the air. She felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. The cottage, which had felt like a beautiful but daunting challenge, now felt like a project she could actually tackle with the right help. And Sterling was an unexpected, intriguing complication. Over the next few days, Stella began to explore St. Jude's Creek. It was everything she'd hoped for, a main street lined with independent shops, a bustling general store that served as the town's unofficial community center, and a river walk that wound along the banks of the creek, shaded by ancient willows. She discovered a tiny bakery that made the most incredible apple turnovers, and a small independent bookstore with a resident cat named Hemingway. She spent her morning sketching, trying to capture the subtle nuances of light and shadow, the way the creek water sparkled over smooth stones, the quaintness of the architecture. Her creative block, which had felt like a heavy shroud, began to lift, replaced by a gentle hum of inspiration. Her evenings were spent unpacking, arranging her furniture, mostly salvaged from thrift stores, and making the cottage feel more like home. True to his word, Sterling sent her an email with a detailed estimate the following afternoon. It was thorough and fair, and Stella, after a moment of internal debate about her budget, agreed to the proposed work. A week later, his truck pulled into her driveway again, this time early in the morning. He was alone, carrying a toolbox and a bag of supplies. "Morning, Stella," he greeted, his voice bright in the morning air. "Thought I'd get an early start on that kitchen door." Stella, still in her pajamas and sipping coffee on the porch, scrambled up, feeling a blush warm her cheeks. "Oh, good morning, Sterling. I didn't expect you so early." He chuckled, a soft rumbling sound. "Early bird gets the worm, as they say, or in this case, the perfectly aligned hinge." She watched him work, fascinated. He moved with a quiet focus, his hands deft and precise. The old hinges were removed, new ones installed, and with a few careful adjustments, the half-door swung shut with a satisfying click, no longer rattling in its frame. "There," he said, stepping back to admire his work. "Good as new. Better, actually." "It's wonderful," Stella exclaimed, pushing it open and shut a few times. "Thank you, Sterling." He spent the rest of the morning on the front gate, replacing the rotten post and installing new, sturdy hinges. By lunchtime, the gate swung freely, securely latching. The transformation was remarkable. "Can I offer you some lunch?" Stella asked, feeling a surge of gratitude. "I made a big pot of vegetable soup." He hesitated, then his smile returned. "That sounds mighty good, Stella. Haven't had a home-cooked meal in a while." They ate on her newly repaired back porch, the sun warm on their faces. Stella found herself relaxing in his presence, the initial awkwardness fading. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, it was always thoughtful, observant. He asked about her work, about why she chose St. Jude's Creek. "I needed a change," she confessed, stirring her soup. "The city was too much, too noisy, too fast. I felt like I was losing my voice, creatively. And I just wanted a place where I could breathe." Sterling nodded slowly, looking out at her wild garden. "This town has a way of doing that, slowing things down, letting you find your rhythm again." He paused, then added, "Heard you're an illustrator, for children's books, right?" Stella was surprised. "You did? How?" He took a bite of his soup. "Small town, Stella. News travels fast. Plus, Mrs. Henderson down at the general store mentioned you were buying a lot of art supplies. and she's a big fan of the Lily the Ladybug series. Stella laughed. That's me. Lily the Ladybug is my proudest creation. The thought of Mrs. Henderson, a sweet-faced woman with twinkling eyes, discussing her work made her smile. They're good books, Sterling said, his eyes serious. My niece, Chloe, she loves them. Reads them all the time. A warmth spread through Stella's chest. That's lovely to hear. They talked for a while longer, about the town, about the challenges of renovating old houses, about the changing seasons. It was a comfortable conversation, punctuated by the sounds of the creek and the gentle rustling of leaves. When he left later that afternoon, promising to return in a few days to tackle the roof, Stella felt a distinct sense of regret. She found herself looking forward to his next visit, not just for the repairs, but for his quiet company. The next time Sterling came, it was to fix the roof. Stella watched from her garden as he moved with impressive agility across the shingles, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the bright blue sky. She brought him up a thermos of iced tea and a plate of her, admittedly amateur, shortbread cookies. He paused his work, his face streaked with dust and sweat, but his eyes were bright as he accepted the offerings. You didn't have to do that, Stella. Of course I did, she replied, a genuine smile on her face. It's hot up there, and you're doing wonderful work. He took a long drink of the tea, then bit into a cookie. These are good, he murmured, a hint of surprise in his voice. Really good. Stella felt a ridiculous surge of pride. Thank you. I'm still getting used to baking in this kitchen. It's an old stove. Old stoves often have the best stories, Sterling observed, wiping crumbs from his chin. Just like old houses, you just gotta learn to listen. She leaned against the ladder, looking up at him. Do you like working on old houses, Sterling? He considered her question for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the roofline, then down to her. I do. They have character, and they tell you what they need if you pay attention. It's satisfying, bringing something old back to life, giving it a new lease. That's beautiful, Stella said softly. She understood that feeling. It was what she hoped to do with her own life, here in St. Jude's Creek. He spent the whole day up on the roof, and by evening the damp patch in the spare bedroom was a problem of the past. He left a small, meticulously cleaned square of new shingles, a testament to his skill. Over the next few weeks, Sterling worked his way through Stella's list. The warped window frame was replaced with a perfectly fitted sash that let in the sunlight without the draft. The loose floorboard on the stairs was secured. He even noticed a few other minor issues she hadn't, fixing a leaky faucet and reinforcing a wobbly shelf in the pantry. Each visit brought a quiet rhythm to Stella's days. She'd wake up, make coffee, and often find his truck already in the driveway. They'd exchange a few words, a brief smile, and then he'd get to work, immersed in his task. Stella would work on her illustrations, the gentle sounds of his tools, the soft rasp of sandpaper, the rhythmic tap of a hammer, the whir of a saw, becoming a comforting backdrop to her creative process. Sometimes she'd bring him a snack or a drink. Sometimes they'd share a quiet lunch on the porch. These were moments Stella started to treasure. She learned that Sterling had grown up in St. Jude's Creek, that his family had been carpenters for generations, and that he loved fishing in the creek on Sunday mornings. He, in turn, learned about her whimsical approach to art, her love for old books, and her quiet determination to make this cottage her true home. One afternoon he was working on sanding down the old scarred kitchen table she'd bought at a local antique shop. Stella sat nearby, sketching, occasionally glancing up at him. The scent of raw wood filled the air, a clean, earthy smell. This table, he said, his voice a low murmur. It's seen a lot, hasn't it? He ran his hand over the smooth, newly revealed grain. Lots of dinners, lots of stories. I hope it sees many more, Stella replied, setting down her pencil. I imagine it as the heart of the home, you know, where friends gather, where ideas are born. Sterling looked up, his blue eyes meeting hers, and for a moment, the world outside the kitchen seemed to fade. It will, he said, his voice soft. This house, it's going to be a real home for you, Stella. I can feel it. His words resonated deep within her, a warm, comforting truth. She realized, with a startling clarity, how much his presence had contributed to that feeling. He wasn't just fixing her house, he was helping her build her sanctuary, one perfectly placed nail, one smoothly planed surface at a time. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. Stella found herself confiding in him about her past struggles, the creative burnout, the feeling of being adrift. Sterling listened with an attentive silence, offering not advice, but understanding. He spoke of his own life, the quiet satisfaction of working with his hands, the deep roots he had in St. Jude's Creek, the challenge of carrying on his family's legacy. He spoke of the beauty he found in simple things, the perfect grain of a piece of wood, the way light fell on the creek in the morning, the satisfaction of a job well done. One evening after he'd finished for the day and Stella had paid him for the latest batch of work, he lingered on the porch. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of apricot and rose. "There's just one more thing on the list," he said, his gaze fixed on the sunset. "The porch swing. The chain is rusted, and one of the slats is cracked." Stella looked at the old swing, tucked away in a corner of the porch, usually ignored. It had seemed like a minor detail compared to the roof or the windows. "Oh yes, I almost forgot about that." "It's a shame," Sterling mused. "An old house like this, it deserves a good porch swing, for watching sunsets, for quiet evenings." He turned to her, his blue eyes holding a gentle invitation. "I could get to it tomorrow. It won't take long." "I'd like that, Sterling," Stella said softly, her heart doing a little flutter. "I'd like that very much." The next morning, Stella woke with a sense of anticipation. She made a fresh pot of coffee and set out 2 mugs on the porch table. Sterling arrived promptly, his tools clinking softly as he approached. He set to work on the swing with his usual focus. Stella settled into a nearby chair with her sketchbook, but found her gaze drifting to him more often than not. He replaced the rusted chains with sturdy new ones, carefully sanded down the cracked slat and reinforced it, making it stronger than before. He even took the time to wipe down the dusty frame, revealing the rich, dark wood beneath. When he was finished, he stood back, admiring his work. "There," he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "Good as new." Stella rose and walked over to it, running her hand over the smooth wood. "It's beautiful, Sterling. You've brought it back to life." He gave a rare, full smile, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "It's meant to be sat on, not just admired." He gestured for her to sit, and she did, settling onto the freshly restored swing. Then, to her surprise, Sterling sat down beside her. The swing creaked gently under their combined weight. He didn't say anything, just looked out at the garden, at the way the morning light filtered through the leaves, at the distant shimmer of the creek. Stella found herself unable to speak, a comfortable silence settling between them. The air was soft, filled with the scent of burgeoning roses and fresh-cut wood. The rhythm of the swing, a gentle sway, felt like a heartbeat. She felt a profound sense of peace, a feeling of finally being exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly who she was meant to be with, in this quiet, unassuming moment. She stole a glance at Sterling. His profile was strong, his gaze thoughtful. She wondered what he was thinking, if he felt the same quiet connection that was humming between them. The sun climbed higher, warming their faces. The porch swing swayed, a gentle rhythmic motion. Stella felt a deep, unwavering certainty bloom in her chest. This was more than just a house, more than just repairs. This was the beginning of something truly special, something steady and strong, like the hands that had fixed her home. She closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the feeling, the quiet promise of a new chapter unfolding. The story of St. Jude's Creek, and of Stella and of Sterling, was just beginning. A gentle melody played out under the warm, watchful eye of the morning sun. Stella eased herself out of bed, a soft sigh escaping her lips. The morning sun, now higher in the sky, cast stripes of warm light across the freshly sanded floorboards of her bedroom. Everything felt different. Lighter. The subtle scent of pine and something else, a clean, metallic tang of new nails and fresh paint, lingered in the air, a testament to Sterling's quiet artistry. She padded barefoot down the stairs, her steps no longer accompanied by the creak and groan of old wood. The house was silent, save for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Sterling was gone. He had always been efficient, arriving early, working diligently, and departing with a quiet wave, leaving behind a profound sense of completion. Yet a part of her had hoped he might still be there, perhaps having a final cup of coffee or checking a last detail. She walked through the living room, her fingers tracing the smooth surface of the repaired window frame. The light streamed in, unobstructed, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The kitchen, too, felt brighter, the cabinet doors closing with a satisfying click instead of a stubborn shudder. It was more than just repairs. It was as if the house itself had taken a deep breath, exhaling years of neglect and sighing in contentment. And Stella, too, felt that same sense of ease. A small folded note lay on the kitchen counter, tucked beneath a freshly polished river stone she kept there. Her heart gave a little skip. Sterling's handwriting was neat, unfussy, just like him. Stella, all done. Enjoy your beautiful home. Sterling. Underwrote 1. Simple, direct, and utterly sterling. No grand pronouncements, just a quiet affirmation of a job well done. Yet, the river stone, a small, thoughtful touch, spoke volumes. It was one of her favorites, a smooth, gray oval she'd found by the creek. And he must have noticed it there, picking it up to anchor his message. A small smile played on her lips. She made herself a cup of tea, the clinking of the mug against the saucer echoing pleasantly in the now solid kitchen. As she sipped, she looked out the window at her garden, still a work in progress, much like her life in St. Jude's Creek. The thought of Sterling tending to her home carefully, respectfully, stirred a warmth deep within her. He hadn't just fixed a house. He had restored a sense of peace, a feeling of security she hadn't realized she was missing until it was there, solid and undeniable. The impulse to thank him properly was immediate and strong. A simple note wouldn't suffice. She wanted to look him in the eye, to convey the depth of her gratitude. And, she admitted to herself, she wanted to see him again. The thought made her blush, a faint warmth spreading across her cheeks. Later that afternoon, armed with a basket of homemade blueberry muffins, a recipe her grandmother had passed down, known for its comforting sweetness, Stella drove her old, reliable sedan towards the small hardware store on the edge of town, Sterling's primary base of operations. The drive was short, winding past fields of ripening corn and beneath canopies of ancient oak trees. St. Jude's Creek was a town that moved at its own pace, a rhythm she was slowly learning to embrace. The hardware store, the creek's corner, was a charming jumble of tools, paint cans, and gardening supplies, all smelling faintly of sawdust and possibility. A bell jingled cheerfully as Stella pushed open the door. Old Mr. Henderson, the owner, a man with spectacles perched on his nose and a kindly smile, looked up from behind the counter. "Stella, good morning, dear. Lovely muffins, I trust," he said, his eyes twinkling as he spotted her basket. Mr. Henderson had a way of knowing everything, always. "Afternoon, Mr. Henderson. And yes, they are. I was hoping to catch Sterling. I wanted to thank him for all his work on the house." Mr. Henderson chuckled, leaning back in his creaky chair. "He just left, Stella. Said he had a delivery to make down by the old mill pond. Shouldn't be too long, though. Why don't you wait? I'll put the kettle on." Stella hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "That would be lovely, thank you." She settled onto a worn wooden bench near a display of garden gloves, the scent of earth and twine comforting her. She watched as Mr. Henderson meticulously arranged a shelf of brass fittings, his movements slow and deliberate. The waiting was surprisingly pleasant, a quiet interlude in her day. She liked the easy rhythm of St. Jude's Creek, where time felt less like a tyrant and more like a gentle companion. About 15 minutes later, the store door opened again, and Sterling walked in, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. He paused, his gaze sweeping the store, and then landed on Stella. A flicker of surprise, quickly replaced by that familiar, gentle smile, touched his eyes. He was wearing a faded denim shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms and a faint smudge of grease near his temple. He looked utterly at home, utterly Sterling. "Stella," he said, his voice a low rumble, a pleasant sound that resonated deep within her. "Everything all right?" "More than all right," she replied, standing up, the muffin basket held out. "Everything is perfect. The house. It feels like a home again, Sterling. A real home." "Thank you." "Truly." He took the basket, his fingers brushing hers, sending a shiver of warmth up her arm. "No need for thanks, Stella. It was a pleasure. You have a beautiful old house." He lifted the cloth covering the muffins, inhaling deeply. "And these smell incredible. Blueberry. My grandmother's recipe." She felt a blush creep up her neck. "I wanted to properly thank you for everything. Not just the repairs, but the care you put into it." He met her gaze, his eyes warm and steady. I understand. He paused, then gestured with the basket. Mr. Henderson, looks like we have a treat. Mr. Henderson, who had been discreetly pretending to sort invoices, now looked up with an expectant grin. Don't mind if I do, Sterling, especially if they're Stella's grandmothers. Heard tell they could charm the birds right out of the trees. They shared the muffins then, standing around the old wooden counter sipping tea that Mr. Henderson had brewed. The conversation flowed easily, light and comfortable. Sterling asked about her garden plans, and Stella found herself talking animatedly about her vision for a perennial bed near the old oak tree. He listened, truly listened, his head tilted slightly, a thoughtful expression on his face. You have a good eye for it, he commented, when she finished describing a particularly challenging shade-loving corner. The soil there is rich, but it holds water. You'll want something that doesn't mind damp feet, like a stillbay or some nice ferns. His knowledge of the local terrain, the specific conditions of St. Jude's Creek, was extensive. It wasn't just about building and fixing. It was about understanding the very fabric of the place. Stella found herself drawn to this quiet wisdom, this deep connection he had to his surroundings. As the afternoon wore on, and the last muffin crumb was consumed, Stella knew she didn't want the encounter to end. Would you like to see the garden sometime? She found herself asking, a little bolder than she intended. Now that the house is settled, I'm really getting into the landscaping, and I'd appreciate your opinion on a few things. It was a flimsy excuse, but it was the best she had. Sterling's smile widened, a slow, genuine curve that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I'd like that very much, Stella. How about Saturday morning, if you're free? Saturday morning would be perfect, she said, her voice light with relief and a burgeoning excitement. As she drove home, Stella replayed the conversation in her mind, a soft hum of anticipation settling in her chest. It wasn't a date, not really. It was a consultation, a friendly chat about gardening. But the way his eyes had lingered on hers, the warmth of his smile, the simple pleasure of sharing a muffin and easy conversation, it felt like something more. It felt like a gentle unfolding, a quiet invitation to explore the possibility that lay between them. The week leading up to Saturday was filled with a nervous energy Stella hadn't felt in years. She tidied her garden shed, pruned back overgrown bushes, and even researched native plants that thrived in St. Jude's Creek. She tried to tell herself it was just for her garden, for her home, but deep down, she knew it was for Sterling. He arrived promptly at 9 on Saturday, a broad-brimmed hat shielding his eyes from the morning sun. He carried a thermos of coffee and a small bag, which he offered to her with a shy smile. Thought you might appreciate some fresh scones, my mother's recipe. Stella laughed, a genuine joyful sound. Scones and muffins will be perfectly fueled for gardening. They spent the morning walking through her yard, Sterling listening patiently as Stella articulated her vision for various sections. He offered practical advice, pointing out areas where the soil needed amending, suggesting hardy varieties of hydrangeas for a shady spot, and even sketching out a simple trellis design for her climbing roses. His presence was calming, his observations insightful, and his quiet humor surfaced in unexpected moments, making her laugh with easy delight. They paused by the old oak tree, its ancient branches reaching like gnarled arms towards the sky. This tree, Stella said, tracing the rough bark, it feels like the heart of the property. I want to create a quiet seating area here, a place to read or just be. Sterling nodded, his gaze thoughtful. A good idea. It has a strong presence. You could build a small stone bench, nestled right into the curve of that root. He knelt, examining the ground. Or even a small deck, raised just a few inches, to protect the roots. He looked up at her, his eyes serious. This place, it has good bones, Stella. Like your house. It just needs someone to see its potential, to nurture it. His words resonated deeply. That's what I hope to do, she admitted, her voice softer now. I came to St. Jude's Creek, seeking a quiet, fresh start, after a few years of feeling a bit lost in the city, I suppose. This house, this town, it felt like a calling. He sat back on his heels, his gaze steady on hers. Lost in the city. I know that feeling. That's why I came back here. St. Jude's Creek has a way of grounding you, doesn't it? It does, she agreed, a comfortable silence falling between them, filled only by the chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves. It was the first time she'd spoken so openly about her past, even vaguely, to anyone in St. Jude's Creek. And with Sterling it felt safe, natural. They talked for hours that morning, moving from the garden to the porch, sipping coffee and sharing scones. Stella learned that Sterling had grown up in St. Jude's Creek, had left for a few years to work in construction in a larger town, but had returned when he realized the demanding pace and impersonal nature of city life weren't for him. He missed the quiet hum of his hometown, the satisfaction of working with his hands on projects that truly mattered to people, not just profit margins. He missed the creek, the woods, the sense of community. I found myself building things that felt soulless, he explained, his gaze distant for a moment. Big, anonymous buildings, here. Every nail, every plank, every repair, it's personal. It's for a neighbor, a friend, it's for a home. Stella understood perfectly. Her own landscape architecture career in the city had become a series of sterile corporate projects, devoid of the natural beauty and personal connection she craved. I felt the same, she confessed. Designing concrete plazas when all I wanted was to dig my hands into rich earth. I just packed up one day, saw a listing for this old house and drove. Didn't know a soul here, but it felt right. It was meant to be, Sterling said softly, his eyes meeting hers, holding them. There was an unspoken understanding in that gaze, a shared recognition of paths diverged and then serendipitously reconnected in this quiet corner of the world. Over the next few weeks, their gardening consultations became a regular fixture. They'd meet at Stella's house, or sometimes at the local farmer's market, where Sterling would help her choose the best heirloom tomatoes or share a slice of apple pie from Mrs. Gable's stall. Stella found herself looking forward to their time together with a quiet intensity that surprised her. She discovered Sterling had a deep love for the natural world. He knew the names of every bird that nested in her oak tree, could identify wildflowers by their scent, and had an uncanny ability to predict the weather based on the shift in the wind and the look of the clouds. He was a man deeply rooted in his environment, steady and reliable, much like the ancient trees that lined St. Jude's Creek. One afternoon they were planting a new bed of lavender and coneflowers by the side of her house. The air was warm and fragrant, buzzing with bees. Stella knelt, carefully separating a clump of roots, when Sterling reached over, his hand gently guiding hers. "You want to tease the roots out a bit like this," he demonstrated, his large calloused thumb gently loosening the tightly bound soil. "It helps them reach out into their new home faster." His touch was light, yet firm, sending a jolt through Stella. Their hands remained close for a moment, his warmth seeping into her skin. She looked up, and his eyes, usually so calm, held a new depth, a hint of something unsaid. The air between them crackled with a silent current, a recognition of the growing intimacy that went beyond shared scones and gardening advice. Stella felt a blossoming of tenderness for him, a quiet affection that had been steadily growing, like the roots of a healthy plant finding purchase in fertile soil. She admired his strength, his kindness, his quiet integrity. He was a man of few words, but every word carried weight, every action spoke volumes. The town, in its subtle way, also seemed to approve. Mrs. Gable would give Stella an extra slice of pie for Sterling, dearie, and Mr. Henderson would always ask if Sterling had been by Stella's place lately, a knowing twinkle in his eye. Stella found herself smiling more often, her steps lighter, her days infused with a gentle joy she hadn't known was possible. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and rose, they sat on her newly built stone bench beneath the oak tree. Sterling had spent the better part of the afternoon mortaring the stones into place, his movements precise and strong. Now, they shared a quiet moment, the air cooling, the first crickets beginning their evening chorus. "It's perfect, Sterling," Stella said, leaning back against the smooth stone, feeling the lingering warmth of the day. "Exactly as I imagined, but even better." He simply nodded, his gaze fixed on the creek winding its way through the valley below. "This spot," he murmured. "It feels right, like it's always been here." "It does," Stella agreed. She turned to look at him, her heart swelling with a feeling she was only just beginning to name. "You have a way of making things feel permanent, solid." He met her gaze, and this time, there was no mistaking the emotion in his eyes. It was a deep, quiet yearning, a shared understanding that went beyond words. He reached out, his hand gently covering hers where it rested on the bench. His touch was warm, comforting, and utterly grounding. That's what I hoped for, he said, his voice a low whisper. For your house, for you, Stella. Her breath hitched. The world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, bathed in the soft, fading light of twilight. The promise she had felt that first morning, a quiet melody under the sun, was now a swelling symphony in the twilight, a song of growing affection and deepening connection. The story of St. Jude's Creek, and of Stella, and of Sterling, was truly blossoming, like a beloved garden tended with care, full of beauty yet to unfold. Her breath hitched. The world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, bathed in the soft, fading light of twilight. The promise she had felt that first morning, a quiet melody under the sun, was now a swelling symphony in the twilight, a song of growing affection and deepening connection. The story of St. Jude's Creek, and of Stella and of Sterling, was truly blossoming, like a beloved garden tended with care, full of beauty yet to unfold. Stella reached out, her fingers tracing the smooth, cool wood of the miniature house. It was perfect, capturing the essence of her own home. A sturdy foundation, a welcoming porch, even tiny carved windows that seemed to glow in the deepening dusk. More than just a gift, it was a tangible representation of belonging, of a dream taking root. Sterling, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion she hadn't anticipated. It's beautiful. Thank you. He shifted closer, the scent of sawdust and fresh air clinging to him. His gaze, usually so steady and calm, held a soft vulnerability that made her heart ache in the most tender way. I wanted you to have a piece of it, even when you're away. A reminder. A reminder of what? Of the house, yes, but also of the quiet moments, the shared laughter, the unspoken understanding that had woven itself between them. A reminder of Himane. Without thinking, Stella leaned in, her hand rising to cup his cheek. His skin was warm, a faint stubble beneath her palm. His eyes widened slightly, a question in their depths. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she closed the small distance between them, pressing her lips softly to his. It was a tentative kiss, a gentle exploration, like the first tendrils of a vine reaching for sunlight. His lips were soft, hesitant at first, then responding with a slow, tender pressure that sent a shiver through her. She felt the warmth spread through her chest, a sensation both new and utterly familiar, as if this was where she had always been meant to be. When they finally pulled apart, the air between them thrummed with unspoken emotions, the only sound the distant chirping of crickets. Sterling's thumb gently caressed her cheek, his eyes dark and full. "Stella," he breathed, his voice a low rumble. She leaned into his touch, a soft sigh escaping her. "I think," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "I think I'm falling in love with this house, and with St. Jude's Creek." She looked up at him, a shy smile playing on her lips. "And maybe with its most talented carpenter too." A slow smile spread across Sterling's face, transforming his features, making his eyes crinkle at the corners. It was a smile that reached his soul, radiating warmth and pure joy. "Good," he murmured, pulling her gently closer until their bodies were flush. "Because I think I'm already there." The days that followed deepened their connection, weaving their lives together like the intricate patterns Sterling carved into wood. Their evenings, once solitary, now revolved around shared meals at Stella's kitchen table, bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp. They talked for hours, sometimes about the house, the intricate plans for the kitchen, the warmth of the newly restored floors, the perfect shade of blue for the bedroom walls, and sometimes about everything else. Stella learned about Sterling's quiet life, his deep love for the natural world, his passion for woodworking inherited from his grandfather. He spoke of the satisfaction of transforming raw timber into something beautiful and functional, of the stories each piece of wood held within its grain. He told her about growing up in St. Jude's Creek, about the generations of his family who had lived and worked there, their roots running deep into the very soil. He was a man of few words, but each word was chosen with care, imbued with honesty and heart. And Stella, in turn, found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't anticipated. She spoke of her demanding, fast-paced life in the city, the relentless pursuit of success that had ultimately left her feeling hollow. She described the moment she realized she was building a life she didn't truly want, a life devoid of genuine connection and simple beauty. "I was chasing something," she explained one evening, tracing patterns on the condensation of her glass that wasn't actually me. I just didn't know how to stop. And the house? Sterling asked softly, his hand finding hers across the table, his thumb gently stroking her knuckles. The house was my escape, my chance to rebuild, literally and figuratively, she confessed. But it's become so much more. It's a foundation for a different kind of life, a life I'm actually starting to love. She squeezed his hand. A life that includes you. Sterling's gaze met hers, full of understanding. I felt it from the first day, he admitted. That you were meant to be here, that this house was waiting for you. Their dates were simple, yet profound. They walked along the winding creek, Sterling pointing out different trees and birds, sharing local lore. They cooked together, filling Stella's partially renovated kitchen with laughter and the aroma of herbs. He took her to see his workshop, a sanctuary of wood and tools, where she watched him work with a quiet fascination, marveling at the strength and precision of his hands. He made her small gifts, a perfectly smooth wooden spoon, a delicate bird carved from a fallen branch, each one a testament to his artistry and his growing affection. The house, too, was transforming. The dusty, forgotten rooms began to breathe again. New windows let in floods of light, freshly plastered walls gleamed, and the rich scent of refinished wood filled the air. Stella painted and decorated, choosing colors that reflected the natural beauty of the creek outside, soft greens, muted blues, warm creams. Sterling's craftsmanship was evident in every detail, from the sturdy built-in bookshelves in the living room to the custom-made kitchen cabinets that fit the space like a puzzle piece. One crisp autumn morning, as they stood in the newly finished kitchen, sunlight streaming through the window, Stella felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The kitchen, once a chaotic space of exposed pipes and bare studs, was now a warm, inviting heart of the home. She ran her hand over the smooth butcher-block countertop Sterling had installed. "It's perfect," she murmured, turning to him. "Everything is perfect." He was leaning against the doorframe, watching her with that familiar, soft smile. "It's almost done," he said, a note of something she couldn't quite decipher in his voice. Her heart gave a little lurch. "Almost done." The words echoed in her mind. The house was a project, a temporary focus. What would happen when it was truly finished? Would the unspoken rhythm of their days, the comfortable ease of their shared lives, simply fade? A flicker of her old insecurities, the ones that had driven her from the city, stirred within her. She had poured her heart into this place, into this connection. What if it was all just a beautiful, fleeting dream? Sterling seemed to sense her sudden shift in mood. He pushed off the doorframe and walked towards her, his brow furrowed with concern. "What is it, Stella?" She hesitated, then decided to be honest. "It's just, when it's finished, what then? You'll move on to the next project, and I'll be here in my finished house, and—" She trailed off, unable to articulate the fear that she would be alone again, the fear that this beautiful chapter would close. He reached for her hands, holding them gently. "Stella," he said, his voice soft but firm. "This house isn't just a project for me. It's part of Juicy, and I'm not moving on, not from you." His words were a balm to her anxious heart, but the underlying question of their future, of her permanent place in St. Jude's Creek, still lingered, a quiet hum beneath the surface. A few weeks later, an email arrived that threatened to disrupt the carefully constructed peace Stella had found. It was from her former boss, a high-powered architect from her old firm. They had a new, prestigious project, a historic renovation in a bustling city. The email was a thinly veiled offer, reminding her of her talent, her drive, and the exciting opportunities she had left behind. Stella stared at the screen, the familiar pull of ambition and professional challenge tugging at her. For a moment, she felt a flicker of the old Stella, the one who thrived on deadlines and high stakes. But then she looked up, out her kitchen window, at the rolling hills bathed in autumn gold, at the quiet flow of St. Jude's Creek, and at the sturdy, beautiful home she had helped create. She thought of Sterling, of his steady presence, his kind eyes, the way his hand fit perfectly in hers. She thought of the community, the friendly faces at the general store, the shared laughter at the town's harvest festival. Could she truly walk away from all of this? That evening, as Sterling helped her install the last custom-built shelf in the living room, she finally brought it up. She handed him her phone, open to the email. He read it slowly, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he handed the phone back to her, his gaze intense. "It's a big offer, Stella," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "A lot of people would jump at that." "I know," she replied, her voice small. "It's everything I used to strive for." He waited, giving her space to speak, to explore her own feelings. "But it's not everything I want, Zinov," she finally confessed, her voice gaining strength. "That life, it felt like constantly climbing a ladder, never truly reaching the top, never feeling truly settled. Here, I feel grounded, like I belong." She looked at him, her heart in her eyes. "With you, I feel like I'm building something real, something lasting, not just a career, but a life." Sterling's hand reached out, gently cupping her jaw. His thumb brushed her cheek, a familiar, comforting gesture. "And what about that part of you, Stella, that craves the challenge, the creation, the architect?" "It's still here," she admitted. "But it's different now. I want to build and create here in a way that feels meaningful. Maybe I could help restore other old houses in St. Jude's Creek, or design a community space, something that gives back to this place, to the people who've welcomed me." She paused, then added, "Something I could do with you." A slow smile bloomed on Sterling's face, radiant and full of relief. "You'd really stay?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, laced with hope. "I've found my home, Sterling," she said, her eyes shining. "Right here, with you." He pulled her into a warm embrace, holding her tight, her head tucked beneath his chin. She felt his heart beating steadily against hers, a rhythm that echoed her own newfound peace. "I was so afraid," he confessed, his voice muffled against her hair. "Afraid you'd realize this quiet life wasn't enough for you. Afraid you'd leave." "Never," she whispered, squeezing him tighter. "This quiet life with you is more than enough. It's everything." The last few weeks of the renovation were filled with a renewed sense of purpose and joy. Every nail hammered, every brushstroke, every piece of furniture placed felt like a step towards their shared future. The house, St. Jude's Creek, and their love had become inextricably linked. The day the renovation was officially complete felt momentous. Stella stood in the living room, a soft throw draped over her shoulder, a cup of herbal tea warming her hands. The room glowed with a gentle warmth, reflecting the last rays of the setting sun. The antique rug she'd found fit perfectly, the old fireplace had been lovingly restored, and the bookshelves were filled with her treasured books. It was no longer just a house, it was hoary home, a sanctuary built with love and care. Sterling joined her, his presence a comforting anchor. He looked around, his gaze lingering on each detail, a quiet pride in his eyes. "It's beautiful, Stella," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "You've brought it back to life." "We brought it back to life," she corrected, turning to him. "I couldn't have done any of it without you, Sterling. Not just the physical work, but you helped me find my way here, to myself, to this." She gestured around the room, then reached out to take his hand. He interlaced their fingers, his thumb stroking hers. "It was always waiting for you," he murmured. "And I was always waiting to help you find it." He led her to the fireplace, where a small, unassuming wooden box sat on the mantelpiece. It was crafted from the same dark, rich wood as the miniature house he'd given her, its surface polished to a soft gleam. "I made you one last thing," he said, his voice a little softer than usual. Stella's heart fluttered. She looked at him, her eyes questioning. He took a deep breath, his gaze steady and earnest. "Stella, from the moment you arrived, you brought light into this quiet corner of the world. You've brought this house back to life, and you've brought my heart back to life too. I've never met anyone like you. You're strong, kind, beautiful, and you see the world with a wonder I'd forgotten. I love you, Stella, more than words can say." He opened the wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft velvet, was a simple, elegant silver key. It wasn't an old skeleton key, but a new, gleaming one, carefully engraved with the image of a tiny house, much like the one had carved for her. "This," he explained, picking up the key and gently pressing it into her palm, "is the key to your home." He paused, his gaze searching hers. "Stella, will you make this your permanent home? Will you build that life with me? Will you marry me?" Her breath hitched, tears springing to her eyes. The question, delivered with such quiet sincerity, went straight to her soul. It wasn't a grand, public proposal, but a deeply intimate, heartfelt plea. perfectly in tune with the man he was and the love they shared. "Oh, Sterling," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. A tear escaped, tracing a warm path down her cheek. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He let out a shaky breath, a wide, joyful smile breaking across his face. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in a joyful spin. She laughed, a pure, unadulterated sound, her arms wrapped tightly around his neck. When he finally set her down, he kissed her, a deep, passionate kiss that spoke of promises made and dreams realized. It was a kiss that sealed their love, a binding agreement whispered not just between their lips, but between their hearts. "I have something for you too," Stella said, when they finally broke apart, breathless and beaming. She went to a small antique desk she placed in the corner of the living room and pulled out a rolled-up blueprint tied with a simple twine. Sterling unrolled it carefully. It was a design for a small, elegant workshop, built in the same style as her house, nestled perfectly into the landscape of her property, just beyond the old apple tree. "A place for us to work together," she explained, her voice soft. "For new projects, for our future projects, and maybe a place to teach the next generation." Sterling looked from the blueprint to her, his eyes shining. "Stella," he murmured, pulling her close again, "you truly are my home." Life in St. Jude's Creek settled into a rhythm of shared purpose and quiet contentment. Stella opened her own small architecture and design studio, focusing on historic renovations and sustainable building practices, often collaborating with Sterling on projects around the town. Their combined talents brought new life to old structures, preserving the charm of St. Jude's Creek while gently ushering it into the future. They designed a new community garden, a beautiful gazebo for the town square, and meticulously restored several other forgotten gems, each project a testament to their love for their town and for each other. Their wedding was a simple, heartfelt affair held in Stella's backyard, under the shade of the ancient oak tree, overlooking the creek. The entire town was there, a testament to the warmth and belonging Stella had found. She wore a dress Sterling had helped her choose, made of soft lace, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers picked from their own garden. Sterling, looking impossibly handsome in a tailored suit, met her at the altar he had crafted himself from reclaimed barn wood. As they exchanged vows, looking into each other's eyes, Stella felt a profound sense of peace. She had come to St. Jude's Creek searching for a house, a place to heal and rebuild. She had found so much more. She had found a home, a community, a purpose, and a love that was as deep and enduring as the roots of the ancient trees along the creek. In the years that followed, their home filled with the laughter of children, a son with Sterling's quiet strength and Stella's bright curiosity, and a daughter with Stella's artistic flair and Sterling's gentle patience. Their garden flourished, tended with care, just like their love, blooming with vibrant colors and sweet fragrances, a living testament to the beauty that can unfold when two hearts find their perfect harmony. On quiet evenings after the children were tucked into bed, Stella and Sterling would often sit on their porch swing, watching the fireflies dance over the creek. She would lean her head on his shoulder, his arm around her, and they would talk about their day, their dreams, their future. One night, Stella looked up at him, her heart overflowing. "Remember that first morning," she whispered, "when I felt that quiet melody under the sun?" Sterling smiled, pressing a kiss to her hair. "It was just the beginning," he said, his voice a soft, comforting rumble. "The first note of our song." And as the stars began to pepper the inky sky, casting a gentle glow over their beloved home, Stella knew he was right. Their story, like the St. Jude's Creek itself, flowed ever onward, a beautiful, heartwarming melody, full of love, laughter, and the quiet, enduring magic of finding home in another's heart. It was a story tended with care, a garden full of beauty, unfolding endlessly under the watchful, loving gaze of the stars. And as she drifted off to sleep, nestled safely in Sterling's arms, she knew, deep in her heart, that she was finally, truly home.